Hi, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. On behalf of AFSP Illinois' DEI Committee, I have the pleasure of hosting our Women's History Month panel on women's mental health. My name is Dr. Dimple Patel, and I work as a therapist in private practice, and I'm also serving on the board of directors for AFSP Illinois. And today we have three lovely panelists joining us today. We have Nina, who is co-host of Gabe and Nina morning show on V96. And then we also have Dr. Sassetti, who is a physician in Oak Park, I believe. And we have Beth Morrison, who is a fellow board member and is a therapist out in Carbondale. So welcome and thank you for joining us. And this panel for Women's Month, I thought was really important, along with Meg and Sean, who are my co-committee members of this. And growing up, mental health was not talked about in my family as well as discussed. And there's a lot of shame and stigma in the South Asian community about mental health. So when I had my first panic attack at 21, while I was at DePaul University, I didn't know what this was a panic attack. I didn't have the awareness and education surrounding it. But luckily, DePaul had a counseling center that I could go to, and I did quick 15-minute sessions, and that's where I finally figured out that what I'm experiencing is normal, but it was a panic attack. And also, I do a lot of advocacy work, but my connection to AFSP Illinois is that I lost my mother to suicide in 2011. And just with my history with depression and anxiety and not really talking about it, and then finding out my mom struggled with it as well, was something that I realized that mental health runs in the family, especially with the women in the family. And so this is a topic that's really important to me. And we have professionals here that are either working in the field or also have experienced it themselves. And so we'll just dig right in. And so I'll start with Nina. Can you introduce yourself to our viewers today?
Yeah, not a doctor. I don't work in therapy, so it's like, why are you here? I like you had panic attacks, but I think I was like 11. And when I went to the doctor at the time, they were telling me that that it was exercise-induced asthma. And I don't think it's because at that time, that wasn't something that we talked about, like stress, and especially living in the suburban neighborhood that I lived in. And I'm half Iranian and half white. So like you know, there's certain cultural things surrounding mental health that you don't talk about. But my journey with mental health has been pretty intense. I also, live with, I won't say that I'm stuck with, but I live with depression and anxiety and have experienced the gamut. But I have found ways of coping, and being able to be a radio host has been pretty special because I'm able to connect with so many people and help people understand that what they're feeling is normal, or it's not a sign of weakness. There are ways that we can live with it and empower each other. And the more that we're aware of what it is that we're feeling, I think there's more strength there. And especially with women that are always ready to support each other. And I'm actually really excited to hear from the professionals to have another outlet outside of, just our girlfriends talking and trying to support each other, because really sometimes, a lot of times, we need more than that.
And you also have something else that you do on the side.
What? Oh, my podcast? Yes. Thank you. I have a podcast. It is on the Odyssey app. My company just flipped. We have a new name today. It's Odyssey, no longer Intercom. But it's called Guilty Pleasures and Growing Pains. And essentially, it is exactly what it sounds like. We go through different points in our lives, whether it's dating, family, jobs, blackout nights, I don't know. And, how we recover from that, how we navigate through that. And the hope is at the end of every episode, there's a takeaway while still getting a lot of entertainment. But we do life together. And that's what I say about being on the radio. That's what I say about my podcast. And for me personally, nothing really is off limits, because through storytelling is how I think we grow.
Thank you so much for sharing. Marianne, on to you.
Boy, I was just loving that. So I am absolutely delighted to be here. And before the show, I told you how exciting it is just to be among young women with so much passion and energy around this. And the opportunity to help healing is magnificent. So thank you very much. It's a real pleasure. So I'm a family doc. I've been doing this for 30 years. I went to medical school at Stanford and then did residency training at Cook County Hospital. So I literally saw both ends of the spectrum of humanity. And very early on saw enormous suffering because of what I learned to ask about and start asking about what was going on in the home. So I have become an expert in violence against women. And of course, all the mental health fallout from that. And then as the universe kind of helps you along on your way, also have family members with very significant mental health challenges. So I became an advocate for mental health advocacy and universal health care. And some of my most privileged work has been on a board of directors for a community mental health agency called Thrive, which is doing magnificent work. And hopefully, I'm hoping we can partner, or you can partner with Thrive that does suicide prevention training. And then also I'm vice president of Sarazan, which is a local domestic violence advocacy program. So those are two of my three interests. The third is teaching medical students, which I do out of Rush, where I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Family Medicine.
Thank you so much.
Oh, and then I work at my practice called Lake Street Family Physicians in Oak Park.
Got
Yeah.
you the boss though.
And last but not least, Beth.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here this evening. I also feel blessed to be here among such wonderful women and to share some stories and get to know you all. And I have been in the field of mental health for over 18 years. I am a licensed clinical professional counselor in the state of Illinois. I do have a part-time private practice called One Life Counseling and Mindfulness Studio. I do believe in the power of meditation. I have witnessed it myself, and it's been such a huge help to me in my life and coping with anxiety myself. But I'm also the director of wellness and health promotion services at Southern Illinois University, where I get to do a lot of wonderful work with students and help them on their journey to success as they grow through their college career. And I really believe that we are all doing the best that we can on our own, and that sometimes we need a little help, and it's okay for us to ask for help. And I really believe in the power of coming together and reducing stigma around seeking help for mental health issues. And I'm really happy to be here tonight.
Thank you. Well, obviously we are excited to have all of you here as well and constantly building connections. So we're just gonna dive right into our questions that we have today. Anybody can answer this one, but what would you say is one of the biggest struggles you have or witness when it comes to women's mental health? Nina, it seems like you want to say something.
I think one of the biggest things for me that I've experienced around women's mental health is that, you know, for the longest time, especially working in a very male-dominated field, I'm sure you all can relate to that, any type of emotion was always a sign of weakness. Not so much anymore. I will say that it's being embraced in a different way, but being able to express yourself and be able to understand what it is that you're feeling, being able to communicate it with the proper people can give off a level of judgment. So I think one of the biggest things is that you don't want to be a crybaby. You want to be tough. I mean, am I allowed to swear in this? For a lack of a better word, like for a lack of a better word, this isn't a terrible thing, but in songs and music and pop culture, you're a bad bee. And in order to be those things, you know, you're tough. And so I think that over the years, and as we all grow up and as we all evolve and we see what it is that's coming in at us, I think we get a little bit confused as to what it is that we're allowed to feel. What are we supposed to see? I think that self-esteem issues around image plays a huge part, especially now, especially for the younger generation. You know, these people are turning to filters and there's no sense of reality. And let's add a pandemic on top of that. And nobody is talking to each other, and everything is digital. And add relationships on top of that. You're trying to find love and all of these things, and there's no connection because people want what's next. So as a woman, you want to be strong and do it all and be the bad bee, get your bag, do all of these things. But where is the sense of where your mind is? We've lost who we are. So for me, I think one of the biggest things that I've encountered with people that I speak to through the radio in my life is remaining grounded. I think that it's easy to be influenced by so many things outside. It's remembering what your brain is, and that why you're special, and why authenticity is so important, and that why your pain and your imperfections are so beautiful. And I think that that's something that we need to say louder and more often.
Bravo. I would say that I'm seeing an evolution, and I'm very delighted that, 30 years ago, women, most people couldn't pick up the phone and call my office and say, I want to talk about depression or anxiety. I used to teach, we needed a ticket to see the doctor. So we'd say headache or chest pain or pelvic pain or something like that, because that's what society said was okay. And now I'm delighted to see an evolution where people literally say out loud that's what they're feeling. Many people. There's still tremendous stigma, but I would say the biggest challenge is the narrative in our heads. The narratives that say what we should do. Should is just toxic. And I don't want to sound too new agey, but truly, I really do believe that the narrative in our head that we all absorb from childhood, media, each other, that is, we should be better, we shouldn't be asking for help, we shouldn't be weak, all of the things that Nina was saying. And more importantly, I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't be defective, I shouldn't be broken, I shouldn't be needy, I shouldn't want help or seek help. I'd say is number one. Compounding with the pandemic is the second thing that over my long career has been the necessity of community. And I think we do not emphasize that enough. We should be raising families in community. We should be raising children. We should be dating in communities. We don't do that. And the pandemic has put us in silos. So when I talk to my patients, I say it's completely normal that you don't feel normal. Our species is supposed to be doing all of these things in community. And we need community, and you need to go find it. And your body's helping you do that. Your body's giving you signals that things aren't right. So I would say community and the narrative that plays in our head constantly.
I would even add like what if statements too. Like all the time that I deal with in sessions all the time, and trying to bring them back to reality and challenging those thoughts of, well, the what if is going to be there, but how do you work through them? And how do you challenge yourself further? Beth, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. And I do think that a lot of times for women, we are seen as the caretakers. So we're the ones who are supposed to be able to handle everything and make sure that everyone else is okay. So if we admit that there's something wrong with us, then we're afraid of being seen as less than, or not being able to handle things and being seen as weak. However, I will say that I have seen a shift in I think even the way that people are thinking and viewing mental health. And I don't think there is as much stigma around seeking mental health or help or asking for help. I see the problem for here where I'm at in rural communities is the lack of providers. So I'm constantly getting referrals. There are waiting lists all over the place. And I think that is definitely something that really needs to change, because here you have people who are willing and ready to seek the help, but there's not the help out there to give them. So that is one of the biggest challenges that I'm seeing right now.
Absolutely. And then, some insurances are still like kind of carrying over telehealth. So at least that's like one way to kind of target it, but that's not going to be forever. Hopefully that can be a change within it. But I definitely agree that it's harder to seek services in more rural areas, or even in underserved communities as well. Beth, you kind of touched on this too, but I'd also kind of like to get Nina's thoughts as well as Marian's thoughts on this. We know that women often carry the weight of caring for their loved ones. How do we encourage women to prioritize their own mental health? And feel free to add more.
So I have developed a standard line, and this is very, I would say this is ubiquitous. This is something that I don't just see regularly, I see it daily. I see most of the people who see me these days are women, and I see it daily, especially because of the pandemic and the demands made on individuals, especially women, the caretakers. So I say, you know, does your mom deserve the best medical care? Yeah. Does your child deserve the best education? Yeah. Do you deserve the safest home? Yeah. Do your loved ones deserve your best self? And then they haven't been confronted with that. And I say, so let's get your loved ones that you are doing so much work for and are so committed to your best self. So the best you will provide for your family in the same way that you want the best healthcare and the best education. And they have never been invited, or seldom have been invited, to see their role that way. So if we can encourage each other in community, helping each other see that when we support each other, when we say, what do you need? How are you going to be your best self? Then we all benefit. So if you're my neighbor and you're taking care of yourself, so you take care of your child and your child plays with my child, then we win. We don't have all of these ripple effects of wounded human beings trying to take care of things that are bigger than all of us.
I agree with that 100%. I think it's that whole concept that, like, if you're going to even show up when you're feeling the pressures of showing up for all of these people, the only way you can do it, as you're saying, is to be your best self. And I think that there was something else that you said, Dr. Sassetti, that really stuck out to me, and that it's not just about being your best self. Your body will tell you.
Yes.
The food allergies that I've developed because of my stress levels, the tests that I've had to undergo over the past few years, fear of cancer because we couldn't figure it out. Thankfully, I'm fine. I just can't eat anything. But it truly is, I believe, nobody can give me a definitive answer, and I'm not a doctor, but from what I'm so in tune with my body tells me when I'm not right. And then I can't help you. I could, if I had children, there's no way I could care for my kids when I'm as sick as I get from the stress and the stuff that I've gone through, because my body was telling me, you're not taking care of yourself. You're going through this stuff and you're falling apart. So who wants to put themselves in a position to actually be sick and fall apart when everybody around you is needing you to care for them? You have to care for yourself in order to be the Superman or Superwoman that you have in your mind, you know? So those were two really big points that stood out to me that I just wanted to hammer home.
Yes, and I would agree that I firmly tell all of my clients and even the students that we work with, self-care, it's a priority. It has to be. You have to come first if you're going to be there for anyone else. If you're wanting to help somebody else, if you want to take care of your children, if you want to take care of family, you have to take care of you first. Your day starts with you. And when we talk about self-care, I hear so many things that I'm not sure really counts as personalized self-care for people. So I always recommend that the self-care needs to be personalized. It's one thing to say you should start running and go run 3 times a week and, you know, for 30 minutes and get that aerobic exercise. But I hate running. If, you know, someone said, well, we could go biking, maybe I would do that, or let's go for a hike. So it needs to be personalized to what really is going to nourish you and refuel you and give you that energy back that you need, and something that you actually look forward to doing. So self-care definitely does need to be a priority.
Yeah, I often quote Howard Thurman, who said, you know, don't ask what the world needs. That's what makes you come alive. Because what the world needs is people who are alive. What our families need is us, our best selves, loving ourselves, so we can pass on and hold a mirror up and show, you know, can I wax on about my daughter, who I don't think is listening, but
yes,
I was putting on makeup one day when she was teeny, and she said, Mommy, can I put on some makeup? And I was just, absolutely not. You are beautiful, just who you are, just how you are. You don't, okay, so you know what she's going to say. So why are you putting on makeup? So exactly. So we're all in this together, this idea of there needs to be a dialogue that's remind that the beauty industry is billions of dollars, people, not millions, it's billions of dollars. And they work by convincing us we're not good enough. So you young women are so exciting to be among. we need to remind each other we are enough. We came to this planet with everything we need. We are enough. Sometimes when my patients come in with somatic complaints, meaning physical bodily complaints, and we do get to the fact that it's an emotional driven or trauma driven, I'll say, tell your body thank you. Tell your body thank you. Your body took the hit. Now we can start to heal. So tell your body thank you and stop being so hard on our bodies.
Yeah, especially like, when you touch on the part of not feeling good enough, those core beliefs, especially tied into that. And me being a very CBT therapist, a lot of the times, I'd have to kind of practice my own skills on that, especially being almost just like 1 year out of my fellowship. And I remember during my advanced practicum year, I had a postdoc, a male postdoc, and every time I constantly felt that I wasn't good enough, and like my anxiety would spike on Sunday nights because I knew I had to kind of go into the week, and I'd be relieved on Friday at 1 p.m. So I'd have to go. And this person made me feel like I wasn't a good enough of a therapist, and also in conjunction with my past experiences, that's going to impact me as a therapist. And now being in private practice, I've actually, was sharing with some of my clients, I've struggled with anxiety for my younger clients. And that's actually been something that's connected us. But for a while, like it felt so shameful because somebody made me feel like that.
I just have to say though, to hear all of you as a person that's not in medicine or, a professional in mental health, I think for anybody that's seeking that help, to know that the person that they're going to truly understands what it is that they're feeling and going through makes it's a blanket. It's like a weighted blanket that makes us feel like we're in a safe space. And so thank you to all of you for providing that for us, because it takes a lot for us to get to that point. For a lot of us to even just get there and ask for that help is so huge. So thank you to all of you for being so willing and understanding, when we get there.
And also even like on the opposite end too, of like when there's like younger women or even girls, for you, of like when they're tuning into your podcast or even on the radio, to see someone that represents them as well, talking about them, that also like aids in that conversation of normalizing these issues and making it that, even though I have all this social media platform, there's parts of me that still do struggle. And I think that's also inspiring for others to see as well. And speaking of that, kind of going back, we have a question from a participant of how do we change that narrative of women being the caretakers, perceived as caretakers, and like how do we empower women to be the best self for themselves?
Okay, I'll try. I don't have an exact answer, but I will say that that's something that I've asked myself. How do I become the best version of myself? How do I prioritize myself as a person that believed at one point in my life that I was expendable? And I had to climb and dig deep, and this may be a triggering statement, but I'm going to say it anyway. So I'm going to just say that as a blanket statement. I believe that I was born with something that it's where I don't want to say that I romanticize the dark side of me, but I kind of do. And this is something that I've had to work through therapy for, and sometimes it wins and sometimes it doesn't, but I'm really tough. And so for me to prioritize myself, it was almost, and I don't want to call it survival because it's not really that dramatic, but it was finding what speaks to you, what makes you come alive. Again, Dr. Sassetti, the quote that you brought up, what is it that makes you feel alive? Like when I talk to high schools and students that are trying to figure out what it is that they want to do with their lives, and you have no idea, and maybe you're even in that position no matter where you are in life. For me, it's looking around and seeing what sparks you. Is it a bird that's chirping in a tree? Is it a painting? Is it a movie? Is it a song? If there's something that moves you, and if you have a physical response to it, I think that it is your duty to yourself to pay attention to what that could possibly mean. And as that starts to come in, it starts to show you that you care about things, and it starts to show you what it is that's important to you. And if you don't already have a strong sense of self, it helps you mold that. And being on the radio, it's hard. I mean, there was a good part of my time where I was trying to be what everybody told me to be, and I didn't really find my voice until maybe 13 years in. That's crazy. But now I know it. And it took all of these different experiments and finding what it is that makes my heart sing, that makes me come alive. And when I figured that out, though, it's a level of work. We always talk about work. You can't just know that all of a sudden your life is going to be what it is that you want it to be. But when you pay attention to these things, your purpose becomes clear. And at that moment, to me, I can't speak for you, but if this moves you and you relate to it, when something speaks to you and you prioritize that, your sense of purpose will drive you to move. And when you move like that, everything that you do makes sense, and you know how important it is to prioritize yourself because you feel it. And then everything after that is an energy exchange. Beth, you probably, with meditation, there's an energy exchange that you feel, and it becomes a snowball effect, and you know to do it again. That might sound crazy, but I'm telling you, from me choosing to beat my darkness in this way, and it worked. And it's a very simple formula, but what makes you feel alive? You have to listen to that.
I also think that sometimes we get caught up so much in labels, and I hear this all the time, I'm an alcoholic, or I'm depressed, and I'm bipolar, and we start calling ourselves by our labels, and instead of disconnecting, it's one piece. I have anxiety, I might have alcoholism, but that doesn't define me. And then when I will ask clients, who are you? And Nina touched on that piece of authenticity. Who would define you? And how do you define yourself? Looking at what your values are, what's important to you, who's important to you, and setting boundaries, setting boundaries with the things that aren't necessarily fulfilling you or feeding you or fueling who you are. Then those are the things that you need to spend less time with. And maybe you need to start delegating or asking for help with the things that, I can't give that up, or I can't say no to that person. Maybe there's someone else who can help you with that, though, and really spend some time figuring out who you are and really what fuels you, what drives you, what gives you that passion. And I think that sometimes gets lost within our labels.
Some of my patients, I let them, I'm like, what, it's hard for you to say no, or you're having difficulties, you can always say, my therapist told me so.
Yeah.
Just leave it on me.
Me too. I would say that I like reminding all of us and my patients and my community and my families that, how do you nurture yourself? We talk a lot about food these days. I'm grateful for that. We have a lot of attention spent on healthy food that nurtures our body in healthy ways. But what else are we feeding ourselves? What else are we consuming? And I know you had prepared a question on media, but if we feed ourselves negative images of ourselves, and we feed ourselves negative images of each other, and we're in competition with each other, and we compare ourselves, we are going to grow that. We are going to grow a sense of negativity about ourselves, a sense of negativity about each other, and we will just continue to feed that. I think it's really important that we now, in this chapter of medicine, where we say it's just as important to talk about how we nurture our souls and our minds as it is our physical body. We get a plant-based diet as the healthiest. What is the healthiest way for us to nourish our minds and our souls? And I think the question somebody was asking is how do you address self-care when there are caretakers? I want to be very clear that sometimes the caretaking we have to do needs to be honored. There is, my dog wants to say, there is enormous amounts of caretaking that are done. And I just want to say, we need to honor that as women and as community members. And very, very often it can be delegated, but very often we have to honor the fact that it falls on us. And how do we help each other with that? So the question from the audience, as far as how do we do that, I would say first, nurture yourself. I caution dogma, but now I'm going to go ahead and be dogmatic. I don't see a way to be your best self unless you have some spiritual practice. And I am not talking about religion. I am not talking about God. I'm talking about something that connects you to your best self, to the person that came onto this planet, unique. We've been around 14 billion years, plus or minus, right? There will never be another one of you or you or you or you. There never has been and there never will be. So how do you nurture that and respect it and honor it is the first thing. So I'm going to suggest that you need a spiritual practice. Pick one. I don't care what they are. Talk to your therapist about them. But a beginning book is Loving Kindness. I'm sure the therapists recommend that. So a very good book for just beginning to do some mindfulness practices.
Mhm.
And then understand how to ask for help, how to say out loud, I'm not going to be able to do that. Can somebody else? And then what's the fallout of doing that? Sometimes you can and sometimes you can't, but to actually think in community or with people who love and support you, to say to yourself, this is something I can't do right now. I can do A, B, and C. I can't do D, E, and F. How does that sound? And be collaborative about it. The silo effect of us living in our silos and staying in our silos and thinking that it falls on our shoulders, but we never tested that. And I'm sure the therapist will say, you know, let's test that theory. Are you sure you're the only one who could take your mom to the doctor on Tuesday? Who else is in the community? Who else loves her? Who else can we rely on? And we just test the theory that we should be doing all of these things that we assume are what our role is in the universe.
Absolutely. Going back to what Beth had said about like, who are you? I remember that question very distinctively when I went to therapy at 21 and my therapist asked me that and I was like, no idea. Because my identity was formed by, I feel like what my family had assigned to me or like this is what you're going to do. You're going to go to med school. All these different things. And I never really I say that therapy allowed me to be selfish and kind of focus on myself. And that's a question I still ask my patients now till this day of like, tell me about yourself. Tell me about who you are, not how people have described you, but who you are. And the response is like, ooh, I have no idea. And I'm like, great, let's start there. And let's work our way of building that up and not with like the surface level. Let's go beyond that. Let's talk about like the good, the bad, the ugly, and also like their strengths and weaknesses. But the hardest part, I think, is you have to acknowledge those parts of you. You can't just dismiss them, but you have to like work through them and really work on those parts. And I think especially we talk about like when we're growing up as young girls, even into like teenagers, into young adulthood, there's that part, I think I even noticed that self-esteem isn't really taught within us. And like, how do you figure that out? Who teaches that to you? We're constantly like working towards the next thing or being like social media, I should be that person, or I should be like this, what other people want. And that definitely does impact our self-esteem. And I think that's a really important part to even acknowledge ourselves. Kind of going on with this past year, has brought up a lot of new challenges, even for me, being a therapist and having to resume like therapy sessions myself, from feeling burnout and exhaustion and just needing a place for me to like vent and have my own say. What would you say that you guys have noticed with just like even in your practices, your encounters with other people, of just any tips with even any tips of managing anxiety, the grief, the loss? How have you seen this past year impact the women that you work with, the women that you're around, maybe yourself?
Well, I know for me in my practice, I'm definitely seeing an increase in anxiety among women and also depression I'm seeing. And just I think Dr. Sassetti had spoke about it so well, that need for connection. So the feelings of loneliness that the pandemic has brought on, having to quarantine and having to stay, they use the word social distance, which I wish so much they would have used physical distance, but
Yes.
that's another topic. But that lack of connection and feeling isolated and not knowing when is this going to end, all of the anxiety, and with mothers who have children at home and who are dealing with kids who miss their friends and miss the events, the social events at school, it has created, like you were talking about, loss issues. it has created grief. It has created depression, so much anxiety. And to allow yourself to experience those things, those feelings are okay to have. And I think it was Viktor Frankl, I think, who said, having an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal.
Right.
So normalizing things and letting them know this is okay. I would expect you to be experiencing anxiety. I'm having anxiety. And then working through some of that, working through the grief and loss, talking about ways to manage that stress and anxiety. I use meditation on a daily basis in my practice, but that may not be for everyone. So finding other coping, and even the coping strategies that we've used in the past, I hear people saying, I used to do this and I would call a friend, but that doesn't even seem to be helping anymore. Sometimes we need to add to our toolbox of coping tools. Sometimes we need to find new strategies and new things. And maybe this is the perfect time to start a hobby that you maybe heard about or thought about and haven't tried yet, but would be willing to. But yeah, this is definitely something that I think we need to be really trying to normalize for the folks that we're seeing.
Absolutely. And also adding on to that, I actually want to go into this. I think this is a really big question of when to go see your doctor, when to go see a therapist, what to look for in a therapist or a doctor, or, and even, you know, for you, like what was important when you were looking for these primary care providers or therapists. What would you say that would be really important for us to look at?
I got to a place where I'm back on medication. And that happened in the middle of the pandemic. And I might have like a weird way of thinking about it, but I think to a certain extent, just real quick before I get to that, there's something kind of great about what happened to mental health during it. I think it broke everybody. I think that it became a mirror. I think that for a lot of the people that I'm around that are alone, I was by myself. I'm a single woman and I was alone a lot more than normal. And a lot of the people that I spoke to were too. And I was really excited, and this is really messed up, but to see some of the people that I knew were hiding behind going out every night, that were going to events and making sure their social calendars were full just because they didn't want to face who they were. They had to face themselves. And I'm sorry for the tears, but at the same time, I celebrate them. Because if that didn't happen, they would never have gotten to the other side. And for me, I knew when my dark was winning that I couldn't keep it together. I didn't feel strong. I didn't feel like myself. When I looked in my own mirror, I wasn't me. I didn't see myself anymore. And I started to scare myself. And again, my level of needing help is probably, I had to wait until I was ready to hit rock bottom to ask for help because I'm tough. I don't need it. I've done this before. And when I say I've done it before, it's a cycle. You know, I mean, my whole entire life is in and out of therapy, on and off of medication, and it's just who I am, and I'm okay with it. And I've learned to get to a place where I understand when it's time to have help, because my rock bottoms were actually very rock bottom. I had a couple scary incidences that I'm still standing, hallelujah. But had things gone a different direction, I wouldn't have. And that's why this particular foundation is so important to me, because I've danced that line too many times personally, friends too. And so help isn't just because I need it, it's a necessity for survival. But that's me. Again, I'm extra. So I'm not trying to scare you guys all in triggers, sorry, all over the board. But I knew that I needed help, and that's when I had to get back on medication. And honestly, I needed it, and it helped me survive the last, whatever, 6-7 months of the pandemic. The beginning was really hard for me.
I just want to honor that courage, Nina. I hope people are listening, and I do hope that my message would be, you can't see a doctor or a therapist too soon. What's the harm? What's the downside of doing self-care and calling a physician or a therapist? A physician that you trust and can create a safe space for you is certainly going to get you to a therapist if that's what you both agree is what your body needs and wants. So what's the downside? So I know that there's access to care issues, but I'm not being glib when I say if it crosses your mind to see a therapist or that you could help, it would help you, pick up the phone and call. That is why we went into this, people. We chose to help you. We want to help you. We're healers and we feel best about what we're doing and offering our community. I'm not going to speak for you two, I'm sure you can, but we want you in our practice. We want you to recognize that asking for help is what we're built for. That's what we're trained for. And we're at our best. I'm at my best self when I don't have to convince people that coming to see me is something they need to be ashamed about or make excuses for, or somehow aren't deserving of. So I would say, again, if you're actually asking a serious, I'm wondering if I should see a doctor, I think the answer is going to be yes. If you're wondering if you need to, the answer is going to be yes. And we don't want anyone hitting rock bottom. That's not okay anymore. It's just not. I'll say that dogmatically. Please don't wait to feel like there is nothing else to do before you get help, because there is so much more to do.
And I also just want to add that it does take courage, and I think those who reach out and pick up that phone and take that first step are extremely brave to be able to admit that something is not quite right. And I also think that, you know, when emotions or when how you're feeling starts to interfere with being able to perform your daily activities, when you start calling in sick to work more times than you normally would, when you stop wanting to go out with friends, when you start isolating yourself, when you're either changes in, you know, eating or sleep, if you're having insomnia, all of those things are perfectly good reasons to seek help. And also another thing I just wanted to point out, that sometimes I think when family or friends try to reach us and notice, you know, something's doesn't seem quite right, I think sometimes our first reaction is to become defensive. But when it comes down to it, our family and friends, they're the ones, they see us, right? They probably see us more than others might, people that we're close to. So someone that you would trust, if they point out that they're noticing some changes, that might be a sign as well that maybe I need to go talk to someone. And I do just want to finish this by saying, I always tell my clients that I see, you are your best advocate. And if just because you were referred to a certain therapist does not mean you have to stick with that therapist. So you need to find someone that is going to work with you where you're at and is willing to share with you what their credentials are, what their training and background is, what their style of therapy is. Like Dimple pointed out, cognitive behavioral. Maybe you're looking for someone who is trained in another form of therapy, DBT or EMDR, any of those. So asking those questions, what your training is, how long have you been in practice? What do you specialize in? Those are all important questions to ask. And then it is perfectly okay to let that therapist know, I don't think this is working. Can you refer me to someone else? But you're your best advocate.
I
Oh
say
my
that
God,
all the time, even in like first initial sessions. If they've been in therapy before, I always ask them for like what went well, what didn't go well, what would you like to work on this time? But I also ask my patients for feedback. Like I always tell them, like every now and then I'll check in with you. If I could be a mind reader, that'd be great, but I'm obviously not. And so it also helps me as a clinician to grow. And it's like you said, it's a collaborative process. And I've had that conversation after the first session where, okay, maybe this wasn't a good fit for your clients have said that. And I'm like, perfect, that's okay. No need to feel like bad about it or feel rejected. So I validate in that sense. So they have like a good experience, like leaving that, knowing that, okay, if it wasn't a good fit, then like, let's connect you with someone else, maybe within our practice. I'm better with the younger population and young adults and teenagers. Older people don't think I'm old enough to work. And so I may not be a good fit for other people. And I've come to realize, I think at first I would take it personally thinking, what did I do wrong? Was I not like a good clinician? Did I like not ask the right questions? So I've had to also like be mindful of the way that I react and have responded to. And even like on some articles I've written and stuff, I do say, I'm a therapist who struggles with generalized anxiety. And that's perfectly okay. And I'm also a therapist who sees a therapist. And those are big parts of my identity that I think are really important to know. But if it wasn't for that first experience I had, even though it was like the worst experience of my life, it led me to therapy, and it led me to loving something so much that I ended up going to grad school for like 7 years. And going on to another question, Dr. Sassetti, this is more so specifically for you, more so touching on prenatal and postpartum depression. How does a mom know the difference between what is normal mood swings and when they need intervention? And how can a mother set herself up to be well taken care of in terms of her body, hormones, family, as well as all the changes going on?
Fabulous, but a complex question. So let me just take one at a time. So it's very important that we do recognize that there's baby blues. And most of us who've had babies, I have baby blues, and that's very short time, and it's generally 1 to 2 weeks. And it really is a mild, it should be mild, and it should be confined to the sphere of teariness, a weepiness, a little bit of overreactivity, a sense of being, I don't know if I could do this, that what happened to my life? Just a more weepy, teary, more vulnerable kind of situation. Postpartum depression is very serious, and most physicians are now providers are now using the Edinburgh depression screen. It's very important, and our OB/GYN colleagues have done a fabulous job of screening women during pregnancy, and those of us who are lucky enough to be family docs who see the spectrum. We talk about taking care of patients from womb to tomb. We will screen people and talk about it repeatedly, bring it up repeatedly during a pregnancy. So to answer the question, a woman should be very aware of what she's feeling and continuing to say, this is what I'm feeling. Being concerned would be when you are feeling like you can't take care of the baby, you can't take care of yourself. Again, what Beth was saying, not eating, not sleeping well, and certainly 100%, absolutely, if you're having thoughts and fantasies of hurting yourself or the baby, recognizing that they're fantasies, but you're still having those thoughts, that's very serious. And you want to absolutely get help. And it's very clear. Again, here's a little dogma to be careful of, but it's very clear that women who get treatment for postpartum depression have a much improved bonding with their babies, and the babies themselves. There's just an article that came out this weekend that babies themselves who are exposed to mothers with depression have a little less, have some cognitive brain-based effects of being nurtured by a mother who's depressed. So please, 100%, ask yourself the question of, am I doing what I need to be doing? Am I kind and compassionate to myself? Am I able to get through my day and function well? Do I have thoughts about not wanting to do this, not sleeping, not eating? And then if you're confused, ask for help. Doc, I don't know if this is normal. Should I be feeling this way? A good doc will say, this is under the bell curve of normal, or you know what, I'm worried about this. Let's make sure we check in next week. Let's make sure I'm asking, can we agree that, well, we're going to check in 2 days, see how it's going. That kind of ongoing dialogue, you should be very willing to have, and find a doctor who recognizes that you need to be checked in on frequently.
Adding to that, if let's say you're looking for a therapist who specializes in postpartum depression, I know in Psychology Today, you can kind of go through filters, look up somebody in your area. And so that's something you can specify as well. If somebody who is trained in it is able to target that specifically. And kind of going on to a question that we had in terms of Dr. Sassetti, a follow-up question in terms of domestic violence, and how does it impact women's mental health? What's the barrier in seeking support? We obviously know like the cycle, is it 9 times or something before like leaving?
5, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. But like, what are some barriers or things that we notice, or even like friends or somebody else that's seeing this? What can we do?
So this is believe it or not, I just did a Zoom today with a patient of mine who is a survivor of domestic violence. So,
Mhm.
Dimple, help me frame that big giant. Let's see if we can get a more specific question. So, the barriers to care around domestic violence
Of
is that?
seeking care.
Oh, so
Or-
there's enormous barriers. You know, again, a giant topic, but we live in a society that tolerates this, period. You know, I can have a whole other discussion about it, but quite simply, we tolerate it. We tolerate enormous amounts of violence against women. It's normalized, date rape culture, it is normalized. To the point, and I'm being quite serious, I've had a young woman ask to put an IUD in her before she went to college because she was afraid of date rape. So ubiquitous that this is what we as women are constantly afraid of. So the barriers to care is a lot of mythology about it. It doesn't happen to women like me. If it's happening to me, there must be something wrong with me. It happens to people who are poor, uneducated, married to alcoholics or something like that. We have to demythologize that. And we have to do that for each other and for physicians and other healers. We have to tell each other, stop thinking that it's not happening to women who look like you or me. It happens to all of us, and we are all in this together and responsible for growing a society that does not tolerate violence. So the barrier to care, I believe, is the societal mythology around it. The second barrier to care is it is almost unheard of, and I'm doing this 30 years, for a woman to walk in and say, I'm a victim of violence. The barrier to care is that we need to grow healers who know how to ask the question and have it be universal screening. The same way I ask if you've got smoke detectors in your house and you wear a helmet when you ride a bike, I ask about, I never say victim and I never say abused, but I say, is it possible we live in a country where lots of us are hurt lots of the time? Is it possible that somebody's hurting you or making you feel bad about yourself? So I think that not very often physicians will not say that they're experts in violence against women, but the younger docs, I'll tell you, I talk a lot about them and they're hungry to learn this. ER physicians are talking about it. So I think the barrier of care, other than when you're in that office, is all of us. We're all in this. Do we tolerate, do we watch shows that glorify rape? Do our partners or the men in our life, are we able to say to them, I need your help telling other young men this is not okay? Are we all doing that? So the barrier to care is that we have normalized and tolerated violence against women, so that when we need help, it's the backdrop. It's like a toothache. Everybody gets it, that kind of thing. I don't mean to be glib, but that's where I personally believe, doing this for 30 years, we all need to be on the same page.
Mhm.
I hope that answered the question.
Oh, yeah, it did. Nina, I think you wanted to say something.
I just wanted to ask, actually, Dr. Sassetti, in your experience, and even if you're not a victim, there's a good chance you know somebody who has been. What do you think has been the most effective way for supporters, friends, family members to get in there? I had a friend that didn't her marriage, she still didn't. And she stayed. So it's almost like you run this risk of dancing on a line, but you want to save your person. What has been the most effective way to help the people you care about from an outsider's point of view?
Yeah, quickly, because this is super important, Nina, thank you. The first thing is to say, I believe you. I believe what's happening to you. I don't think you're making it up, number one. Number two, there is nothing that you are doing or not doing that is causing your partner to do this. I know that for a fact, because this is a crime. We are not responsible for preventing men from committing crimes, and yet that's what we act like, don't we? The third thing is to persist. In fact, early in my career, when I was becoming an expert, I was surprised. Like I asked you last year if you were, a victim, and I did it in my best doctor way. How come you didn't tell me? Because they weren't ready. And there were a lot of other things going on. So I would say persist, persist, persist. Now, when I have a patient that I'm convinced is in a violent relationship, I'll say, I just need you to know, Mary, I'm really concerned about this. And I want you to hear, because I'm concerned about it, I'm going to keep asking about it. So I want you to know that I will be here, whatever your answer is, but I want you to know I'm going to keep asking about this and making sure you know. And I want to be very careful here. Women overwhelmingly want the violence to end. They don't necessarily want the relationship to end. And we do them a disservice when we say, why don't you leave, right? Because the question is, why is he beating her? Not why don't you leave? So there's enormous amounts of literature that talk about, it becomes very unsafe for women when they leave if they don't have a plan and they aren't supported with that. If they feel like we're offering them all or nothing, you either leave him or I can't be your friend, it doesn't help her because that's the position that she's in. She is caught in this cycle. And we could talk about that. So to be very specific, persist. If it is your friend that is in this relationship, persist. And then ask permission. Do I have permission to have somebody talk to him or can I talk to him? Now, I want to tell you that might be on everybody's mind. You can call the police or anything for probable cause. You can call the police and say, a woman next door to me is being beaten by a man. I always say being beaten by a man, please don't say husband. I wish we were more woke and progressive, but we aren't. We have a tendency to believe that what happens behind closed doors is private. A man is beating a woman next door. Please come. So that one of the things that happens is we use authority to say this is wrong and it's a crime. Battered women, victims of violence, often tell me, nobody told me it was wrong.
Mhm.
Nobody told me he shouldn't be doing this to me. I thought it was my fault. I thought I was doing something. So if we all, if authority, if people in the community say this is wrong, it shouldn't be happening, victims, whether they're children who are experiencing violence, it's not okay that your dad is hitting you when he's angry. It's okay to be angry. Not okay that your dad hits you when he's angry. Did that answer your question, Nina?
Yes. Thank you.
Sure.
So we have 3 more questions left. One actually is a really great question from a participant, and they asked, what's the problem with having to take medication? Can you talk about the fact that because you have to take medication for your depression, that it does not make you inferior than anybody else? Like, for example, people who take medication for their blood pressure, it should be acceptable as well to take medication for mental health stressors and issues.
I think, yeah, no, Dr. Seti, please. I was just going to ask and maybe lead you into this question because it's something that I have to understand for myself too. Is it true, this is my belief, that some people's bodies are not made with the proper, like, chemical imbalance is real? Is that true?
1,000%. So when we talk about a family history, what is it? It's encoded in our DNA, right? Of course, nurture and nature. And I think everybody's hopefully aware of childhood adverse childhood experiences that predict almost linearly. The more trauma or negative nurture experiences that you have, the greater the prediction of emotional, mental, physical, poor health. So there are many of us who come into the universe deficient in many enzymes. And we can talk about them, different disorders, but the one I like is diabetes. So if you need insulin, do you feel bad that I'm giving you insulin? And the answer is, of course not. I see that. I live in the same world you do, Doc, but my brother-in-law is telling me I'm a wuss, and my mother's asking, what's wrong with me? Nobody's in our family's ever needed medicine. And yet they'll go on to tell me that there were screaming matches and a mom who went to bed and never came out of her room for weeks at a time. Enormous amounts of evidence that there's a lot of mental health challenges in that family. So I always say, what takes more courage? Taking blood pressure medicine or taking something that's going to help you and your family be your best self? So I admire people who are able to say out loud, like you, Nina, that I take medicine because it makes me be my best self. And what I also tell people is thank God, and I mean this sacredly, thank whoever's up there that I practice in a day and age where I can improve the outcome of not just you and your well-being, but your family. Thank God. And it's in this bottle. Now, I do want to say, and I'm very evidence-based, so that's the term in medicine these days. And I teach my patients, anything a doctor tells you you should do, you should turn around and say, what's the evidence? Because that's what we're all calling on. So evidence-based medicine says that the best outcomes for depression are the combination of therapy and medicine. So I want to be very clear. If you require medicine, if your brain biochemistry does best with medicine, you should also be getting therapy too. And a good physician will, or healer will tell you that.
Absolutely. I've even like have had conversations with my patient psychiatrist or
Yeah.
primary care physician to kind of relay back and forth of like what I see in therapy as well as like what they're working on. And I'd really try to make an active effort to like make sure that communication is open pending a release of information form. So our last two questions on this is, what would you say are some of your go-to self-care activities or skills that you use? And what are some ones that you would recommend, especially being at home or working from home or when there's anxiety or depression? What would you say has worked for you, but as well as what you recommend?
Let Beth go. I've been talking a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fine. I think I've mentioned it a couple of times, but for me, the meditation and breathing, breath work for me is extremely easy to do. And it can take very little time. There's a 4-second breath where you just inhale slowly for 4 seconds. You hold your breath for 4 seconds. You exhale slowly for 4 seconds. You repeat for about a minute or two, and it can bring you almost an immediate sense of calm. Yoga or even exercise, but my go-tos definitely would include some type of breathing routine and meditation.
So I'd like to share what literature evidence is. So we now have evidence of what does work. And of course, what Beth is saying is find it. And my dogmatic statement about find a spiritual practice that works for you. Explore them, be a researcher yourself. But here's what the literature says. And this is one of my favorite. A study from the United Kingdom said that if you're out in nature for 2 hours a week, you have significant decrease in depression and anxiety. If you do energy work for 20 minutes a day, and Beth talked about it, yoga, Tai Chi, and Qigong are in the literature. In our culture, yoga is the most available, I think. And I discovered during the pandemic, I just think her work is magnificent. Yoga with Adriene on YouTube. Her sensibility is that she wanted to offer it for free. I find her amazingly available. You get on a mat and just follow whatever she says. So that's evidence-based. Out in nature, energy work, mindfulness, and I think Beth is talking about mindfulness also. I recommend the app called Calm, C-A-L-M, and it will walk you through. I think way too often we get turned off with the, okay, clear your brain. And I possibly do that for a millisecond. 1,000 thoughts come in my brain. So what mindfulness, and especially if you use an app or get directed, really just encourage you to allow those thoughts and then come back to breathing. Allow the thoughts, come back to breathing, that kind of thing. So you're not beating yourself up with, I can't do this right. And then there are supplements that we talk about if you even just Google it, but vitamin D, absolutely. Fish oil, omega-3s, zinc, B complex vitamin, and magnesium. Those are all evidence-based to help brain health. And then of course, everything that nurtures you. And you don't have to check it out. If your heart will sing, you know what it is, whether it's being with people you love or reading something or turning on music. Our species is hardwired for ritual, by the way, and that's something that we missed during COVID. Burying people with a ritual, celebrating new life with a ritual. So come up with some rituals that make your heart sing, whether you have a little altar or something else. Music is very therapeutic. Listen to music and dance. Drumming has also been shown to be very cognitively, neurobiologically therapeutic. So get a drum. Nobody can hear you anyhow. It's COVID. So get a drum and dance and sing and all that.
I sing while I drive, and then when I like see another car next to me, I stop or like I'll mumble, and then when they're gone, I start singing again. But
I'm old enough, I just keep singing.
One of the things I think I also like, I was that person that said I would never download TikTok, like I'm too old for this. And then I did in March last year and clearly got a little addicted to it. But I actually like picked up some new hobbies from it. I learned how to make some resin coasters and all these different things. And then I bought a Cricut machine. So I've been making like personalized gifts for friends, but that was something that I was like, oh, this actually like relaxes me, and it like kind of allows me to focus on something else especially like when I leave sessions it's hard to kind of unplug from it, especially like if it's a telehealth session or I have to do case notes at home or anything. And I think I had to find a balance between work and social life. And that's always an area that I've struggled to kind of have boundaries within. So that's something I'm actively working on of, okay, I don't need to respond back to my patient right away. I can wait a couple hours. And so those are some boundaries that I had to set in place. But sorry, Nina, I think you were going to say something about like some of the self-care things you mentioned.
I was just going to add on to the whole supplement and stuff. The other thing that I found too is that food to me is medicine. And again, with my food allergies, but also I love to cook. So I've just to piggyback off the omegas and stuff like that, it's just certain food that you eat that actually is mood enhancing. And so aside from working out, being in control of what I put into my body and just being in control at all, psycho, not the right word to use right now. But it helped me. So that was all, just piggybacking off of the supplements and food.
One thing, if I could just add to,
Yeah,
I wanted to earlier, is just sometimes too, like the importance of stepping outside of ourselves and doing volunteer work.
Oh,
And, you know, when Dr. Sassetti was talking about spiritual, helping someone else or volunteering at a shelter, at an animal shelter, at a domestic violence shelter, at a nursing home, really, when we're talking about doing things that are fulfilling and can actually take you away from some of the issues and struggles and problems that you're facing, to give yourself to someone else or something else can be so rewarding.
So one question for you guys is, for each one of you, if you could go back in time, what piece of advice, one piece of advice would you tell yourself to help yourself cope?
It's going to be okay. I know that seems so ridiculous, but I've gotten to a place where it's that go with the flow, live and let God, for a lack of a better word, but the spirituality, it's going to be okay. I think I let myself get stuck a lot in humps and create problems that didn't exist. And if I had just relaxed a little bit and let life flow, I think, I don't even remember who it was or what I read, but it was this whole concept of, you know, life is like a river, it flows upwards. And the second you start, you know, trying to go the other way, you create problems for yourself. So for me, that it's going to be okay, and going with the flow really is hard, but if you can allow yourself to do it, it saves you a lot of pain. For me.
I think for me, it would be to remind myself to love myself. And even if that means, you know, starting each morning, the first person I say good morning to is me. and to even just say, you know, Beth, you got this. I love you. To start to start each day off with that you are important, you matter, and you're worthy.
I love that.
I love this question. When I easily will say, for me, you're enough. Stop worrying about doing and just accept being. So much of many professional women's lives is about what we're doing and how much we're doing and how well we're doing it. So I'd love to go back and get those years back where I did a lot of doing, and I do a whole lot more being.
I think for myself, I would probably have told my younger self, like, so much what Nina said, that it's gonna be okay. It's okay to not be okay. But the other part is allowing myself to acknowledge even the little victories or even like big accomplishments in my life. I am the one that's like, oh, thank you. Like, and then I'll move on. Okay, like what's the next thing I gotta do? The next thing and next thing. And that validation kind of comes from other people, but it's hard. It was hard for me to tell myself. I would say even up until like last year, it was the first time I said, oh yeah, I am proud of the work that I did, that I went through grad school. My parents came here from India in 88 with me, and having to go to school and like be the translator for my parents and like doing a lot of these things on my own. For me, that just was normal, that you just keep going. And I think that's the other part, that the biggest part is acknowledging the things that I do. And I think we're like set, even as like women of, we measure our self-worth and the things that we accomplish by the validation or comments that we get from other people. But what about ourselves? Like, are we giving it to ourselves? And in sessions, I have my patients say, I am proud of myself. And they giggle, they laugh, or it's like weird. And I acknowledge that. And I'm like, of course it's going to be, because when's the last time you did that? When's the last time you put yourself first and like talked about yourself in a positive light? And I will make them say it a couple times until they feel like they're not like feeling about it. But those are the things that I think I've definitely paid attention to. So, I actually had, if anybody has any last minute thoughts before we kind of close out to add it?
I would like to invite us all to be first compassionate to ourselves. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then it is time to see a therapist or get into some groups or something like that. So commit to being compassionate to ourselves, and then commit to being compassionate to each other. I would just invite us all to do that. And you've got these fabulous role models. You young women are so lucky to have each other. I can't tell you how encouraging it is to see this. I didn't see it when I was your age, that's for sure, or early in my career.
Yeah, and I think it's actually kind of going on that last part of what your statement about that social media piece of it, that I do see more people talking about it and being more open that, yeah, I've struggled with these different issues and stressors, and that I see someone else like me that's talking about it. And that was like one of the primary reasons for myself that I finally spoke out in 2015 about like why I was participating in the Out of the Darkness Chicagoland walk. And for me, it was that because I was so sick and tired of the shame and stigma. But when I was going through it with my car accident and recovery in 2008, and then now, and then with my mom, it was the big part of just feeling alone. And my friends are so great of supporting me through it, but like there's parts that nobody could understand. And as I got older, I realized that, my friends do say I'm a very loud and outgoing person. So I'm like, why not use that for something good? And it dawned on me that if I felt this way, and people see, like we talked about Instagram and social media, they see all these different things. And then like, it says like, it shows that I have probably a pretty good life, or that I'm outgoing and doing all these things, but there's this whole other side to me. And I wanted to address that behind these pictures and stuff, there's this whole other side that I've gone through, but I was so embarrassed to talk about and shameful that I knew that I wasn't the only one. And so that was my biggest motivation, that to be able to see someone, for other people too, that looks like them, especially like a young South Asian woman that has gone through it and is talking about it, that they don't feel alone. And that's something like Nina and I first had talked about when she had reached out to AFSP Illinois for her podcast, which I had the pleasure of joining and jumped the opportunity to do so. And we talked about how that, it's still going to take us a lot of time, but we're really working on kind of changing that narrative. And the biggest part is normalizing mental health, normalizing taking medication. I do. And I see my psychiatrist and my therapist in conjunction. And I think that's that biggest part, that like knowing that we're not alone, and seeing someone else talk about it is very inspiring, and kind of feels that online community as well.
Not alone in the community is the biggest takeaway, I think, from all of this, and just for us as we go about our business. I love it. You guys have all said really amazing stuff and have inspired me. So thank you so much.
No, I'm so
Get on that radio, build community, darling. You got it.
I'm working on it every day.
You got it.
5:30 to 10 a.m. on B96.
What time was that again, Nina?
5:30 to 10 a.m. on B96.
I know, we're keeping Nina past her bedtime right now. But with that, there's been a lot of comments for you guys, and love and support. I'm sure we can probably go on till 9 o'clock, but we're gonna end this now, but hopefully that we can always have you guys back in a future panel. but we have shared your information with the participants, and sincerely want to say thank you from the DEI committee and AFSP Illinois for being with us today. And even with the professionals, Nina, we loved having you. And a lot of your questions were really great. And so it doesn't matter if you're not a doctor, being part of the conversation, I would say, is the biggest point. And so this has been recorded, so we will be emailing out a link with our YouTube channel on it, so you can also look at past DEI panels, and look forward to our next one on potentially, I think, April 20th on Asian American mental health, which will probably be moderated by me as well. So thank you everyone for joining us, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hold
Good
on.
night, everyone.
Good night.
Stop.
Great work.
recording. Okay.